We're going to give you guys a little demonstration today on exactly how it's best to put the UltraBaseSystems panels together. We get questions around the world saying, should we do it this way or should we do it this way? We're going to show you the process that I think is the best way to install it. It's the fastest. I always say that if you install the way that I show you here, it takes 3 people bringing panels to you in order to keep up with 1 installer on the ground. And that way you can really get a job done quickly. So I want to show you a little bit about how we go about doing this. First things first is that you've got to have the right tools. Now for this project and for these panels, it's really simple. This is it. You want to have a pair of knee pads that has a hard surface on the front because the panels do have the turf barbs. They're great for holding the turf in place. That's why we designed it, but they will tear your knees apart. So you gotta have proper knee pads, and then we like to use leather gloves. So let me put this stuff on and show you exactly how we go about putting these things together. Okay, here we are, we're all suited up now. We got our knee pads on, we have our leather gloves, and what we're going to do is show you how to put these panels together. Now, we just have a bank of 9 panels here, but that's typically what you're going to see on an installation because you're going to start in long rows and then fill in between. So let me show you what we do here. What we do is we kneel on the panel, and we want to always reach out and take the first panel and slide it in just till it begins to engage and then click it in place. And we're going to come over here, grab this panel. Again, we want to kneel back far enough on this panel that we're not too far forward where we can pinch these teeth down to make it bind. So we lean back here, we bring the panel in, snap it in place. Now, this is where guys get confused, how to do the middle panel. We always kind of describe it as like rowing a boat. You're always pulling the panels to you. You're not going to want to push them in place, you're not going to kick them in place, and we're going to show you why that won't work in a second. But here's a perfect example of what happens on a typical installation. We're leaning back, we're kneeling back here on the panels, our weight is off the teeth, we reach for it, we grab this panel, we slide it in, and we lock it. That's it. That's how you do it. So let me just kind of keep going here. Basically, put that panel in, reach out here, get that panel locked in. The knee pads also let you slide around on the plastic panels pretty nicely. Bring that one in, bring it in there. And the last panel comes in and locked in place. Now, if you get a situation where you've built your system and you've got some gaps that you're not happy with, now understand something, the gaps aren't bad because we're going to have the panels expand and contract in the sun. So if you've got a little bit extra gap, it's okay. But if you have too big of a gap, you can basically give it a little kick and you can see, boom. And all of a sudden you can move them and you can lock them in and get things played, and now your gap is gone. So it doesn't mean that you have to go in here and beat on the panels with a hammer. I've seen pictures of guys with rubber mallets and I cringe when I see that. You don't need to do any tools like that. All you basically need is your hands, and sometimes you got to persuade them in a little bit with the toe of your foot, but that's pretty much all you have to do a full assembly. Oftentimes the next question we're asked is, how do you take the panels apart? Well, really just reverse what you did as far as the assembly. One of the things you want to make sure of, you don't want to ever be trying to lift the panels up. Once you do that, you're binding all the patented locking teeth together. We don't want that to happen. So taking these panels apart, essentially you're just going to sit down on the ground and snap it. You go to the next one, snap it apart. So you just give it a little quick jerk and they'll come apart very easily. So do it the way we're showing here and you'll have no problems. One of the great things about UltraBaseSystems and the Tour-Lynx panels is that they are able to contour and flex over terrain. If you're building a field, you're never going to have that issue. You're going down flat and it's as easy as can be. But when you're going over like a putting green contour, sometimes you'll get a situation where the first panel is coming over the contour and the second panel has to go in. And you can see here, I've got Gary holding this panel up, just leave it right there. If I were to slide this in just like this, these 2 panels aren't going to match because this one is slightly higher. So what has to happen sometimes is that you have to have a helper that will kind of pick one panel up, he'll grab that panel, then we'll lock them together, and then we'll go in. And what that does is he's helping me align the second panel to get it in. It's just really when you're going over top of a severe contour, you need that, but it's a good little technique to have if you have a helper that can help you do it. It makes easy work of it. Our customers are always concerned about expansion and contraction. What we try to explain to them is that each panel is built with a certain amount of expansion and contraction built into the system. And you can see by the movement we have here, that allows that when the panels are expanding in the sun, and contracting, all the movement occurs inboard in the system. It doesn't start to push the whole entire system out. It's all happening inside here. So that's why we leave certain gaps. When the panels are cold, for example, we want to leave a gap so when they expand, they can come together. But all this occurs inside the panels, and it's built into each UltraBaseSystems. They won't disengage during expansion and contraction, but this is what allows the system not to warp and move on you once it's installed. This is a pretty good example of what gaps may look like early in the morning when it's cold outside. Because, like we said, the panels expand and contract. You can have the panels tight together in the afternoon, but in the next morning you may see a slight gap like this. Now this is under the turf. It doesn't matter, and it's actually less severe under the turf. This is a kind of the worst case scenario, but you will actually see gaps begin to open and close on the panels during the time of the day because of the heat that's on the panels or that's coming through the turf. All right, a little trick that we do, if let's say you're building a big bank of panels and you wind up with gaps that you didn't want for some reason or other, instead of being on your hands and knees, this is a little thing that we kind of call like bunny hopping across the panels. You can just basically start going and then moving them in and moving them in, and you do that, and you can basically open your gaps up, or if you need to go the opposite way, you can close the gaps up. It's just a really fast way of either opening some gaps up or closing them once you have a big expanse of panels down on the ground. All right, we're going to show you some different techniques on exactly how to cut the panels. Now, one of the things that's important to understand is if you're going to be cutting the panels and you're using them on a straight line, we've built it with this internal wall right there, which allows you to, when you're putting the turf down, staple on top of the panels. Remember, you're always stapling in the panels, no more need for nailer boards. And then your turf can come over the panel and then staple into the sidewall. So we're going to show you a couple different techniques on exactly how to cut the panels. Now here we are on a table saw, and what we want to do, we've already set the table up to where we're just cutting to the inside of this wall. So that means that we're going to wind up with a full wall when we're done. So we're going to flip this panel over. We want to cut it with the spike side up, and we're going to always put our safety glasses on. I sound like Norm on this old house. And let's just go ahead and show you how to cut these. Now what you can see what we've done, we've created this nice flat edge that we can use as a border edge. We can take our turf and bring it over the top and staple to it. So we've got a nice solid wall there. Panel hasn't lost any of its structural strength. This is just a real easy way to do it. If I'm going to do a field and I know I've got to do 30 or 40 or 50 of these panels, I'd much rather do it here on the table saw, either in my shop or on a table saw that we rent and take to the job site. But this is a really fast way of making this cut. Now, one last thing, if you needed to do a corner, you would simply just run the panel through the saw again, and now you would wind up with two edges that have this finished wall on it. So that's how you build a corner piece. Okay, now we're going to show you a couple ways to cut the panels that if you don't have the luxury of a table saw and you're out in the field and you need to make some straight cuts, let's show you how to go about doing that. Now, first thing, obviously, we've got to mark the panel. So you have a straight edge. You can either use like a silver marking pen, or you can use a chalk line. So in this case, I'm going to use a chalk line. So essentially, I would just say I want to cut a line right here. I've already measured it. I bring my chalk line over, I hook it in, or I have a helper help me. We bring it back, grab our chalk line. Okay, so now we have a nice mark on the panel, and now I'm going to show you a couple different ways how to cut it. Okay, now a really easy way how to cut a panel on a job site is with a skill saw. And when you're cutting a panel like this, it's always good to have somebody either hold it down steady for you or have it clamped down. So we got our line marked, and we're going to show you how to cut it really easy with a skill saw. Okay, now, if you've got to cut around some shapes that you're either going around, say, a sidewalk or a curved shape or a putting green, an easy way to do it is with a jigsaw. So let's just take the panel, and I'm just going to make a mark here with our black marker, and we've got something there that we need to cut. So you can see I've kind of marked a little bit of a curvy line. So all I'm going to do now is take my jigsaw and just basically, this stuff cuts just like wood. So you can see Very easily, we cut a nice pretty shape out of the panel, took no time at all. So it's so easy to work with the UltraBaseSystems panels and the Tourlinks panels. You're going to work it just like you would a plywood floor. It's easy, you don't need sophisticated tools. Anybody can do this type of installation. On both these tools we use, both the jigsaw and the circular saw, we use an aggressive cutting blade. If you go to your local hardware store, you can look through the packages. Some will say for fine cuts, some will say for coarse, fast cuts. That's what you're trying to do. This blade on the jigsaw, for example, is very, very coarse. We're not trying to make a pretty finished cut. This isn't finished carpentry. We're just roughing this in so that when we cover it with the turf, it all looks beautiful. So get the blade that's going to make the fastest work of the cuts and you'll be good to go.